Welcome everyone. I'm glad we are glad to have you here. I'm Vedam Karpakar Kunjaram. I'm a biology faculty at Broadway campus. I teach non-majors biology and majors intro biology for majors part one and two. Carol.
Yes, and hello, my name is Carolyn Schick. I direct the STEM Learning Assistant program at the college, and that's where I train and mentor students who have previously taken a STEM class and place them into the same STEM course to support their fellow students. And we also have Rachel Bonaparte Hagos with us, and she is the scribe for this session. She's the interim director of the Institute for Part-Time Faculty Engagement and Support, and so she'll be taking notes as we're doing the discussion together. And so we have a big topic from critical race theory. And so we want to narrow that down and focus on three points in our science-focused discussion. So I'm going to read those 3 points. So science has been used to exacerbate racial inequities and undermine trust. Persistence in STEM is low for underrepresented minority students. And for underrepresented minorities' success, there is an urgent need to transform science education. And so what Vedam and I are going to do, he's going to present on the first 2 points of these ideas, and then I will present on the last point. Vedam?
Right. Thank you, Carolyn. So let's start with a couple of familiar examples from sciences on where we see disparities, where we see malpractices and racial biases coming in. The 2 things that stands out to me when I'm discussing health disparities or racial biases with my students is to share how Ms. Henrietta Lacks, her cells, her cancer cells, have been used for decades in research for research purposes, but she was never asked for, her consent was never asked for using her cells for all the research purposes. Until recently, where the research community is trying to reach out to her family and try to make amends with that. And the other example that you're all probably familiar with is the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where especially African American males have been used more like an experimental subject to study the infection patterns. And there are a lot of other examples, even from the most current times, to show how the health disparities and systemic mistreatments is quite common in sciences, like in many other disciplines. We can go to the next slide. From the education point of view, since we are, as a higher education institution, we are serving students in their learning process. I want to introduce this data, which at least some of you may have already seen, will be familiar with this kind of data. On the left side, you're looking at the percentage of population of underrepresented minorities that were entering into higher education in 1992 compared to 2017. Just to clarify here, the acronym PEERS here is referring to persons that are excluded due to their ethnicities or race. And so this is a more relatively a narrower group we are referring to, rather than the underrepresented minorities. But the patterns with, if you include all minorities, probably are going to remain similar or comparable. So even though this looks like a kind of a good news, we have done better in academics by enabling more peers to enter into academic institution. The real concern is actually in the data you see on the right side of this figure, where the peers compared to non-peers, which is the blue bar, non-peers are the blue bar. What the data you're seeing at the top is 1992 data on the persistence of peers compared to non-peers. And at the bottom, you're seeing 2017 data for persistence. Persistence here is measured in what percentage of peers are earning the bachelor's degree in STEM. What percentage of peers are earning a PhD in STEM discipline as opposed to the number entering. And you can see the numbers have not really changed much. It has remained low. And so this is where we want to see what's going on in terms of why we are losing disproportionately larger percentage of peers or underrepresented minorities from STEM disciplines. And I think the discussion today, we can set the stage based on these and how it connects to critical race theory moving forward. Carolyn?
Mm-hmm. So STEM education researchers can also look at how we're doing in STEM with different classroom learning environments. And this I have highlighted by a paper from the Journal of Chemical Education that was published this year. And if you look at the graph on the left, it shows two groups, advantaged and marginalized. And so when we're born, we all have the same potential for learning. So the average of the two plots are equal in height. Then the STEM education researchers asked chemistry professors from across the country at a variety of different types of institutions, and they administered an assessment at the start of their introductory chemistry course. And this is referred to as the pretest, and this assesses content knowledge before the course even begins. So the graph on the right shows the two groups, those referred to as advantaged and marginalized, separate in content knowledge. And you can see there's a double arrow in red, which can be attributed to what the authors type societal inequities before the students start the course. And factors like educational funding, the legal system, healthcare, and certainly many other factors contribute to this gap. And then at the end of the semester, the chemistry professors gave these same students the assessment again, and that was called a post-test, and they looked at content mastery for the two groups. And what the STEM education researchers are interested in is watching this red arrow, whether the gap grew, stayed the same, or narrowed, comparing the pre-test with the post-test. These are concept inventories that happen in all of STEM, actually, not just in chemistry. And so when you look at that data, that can help faculty with course redesign and the goal of closing that gap and promoting STEM success for all. On the right-hand side of the slide, there's a short list of ideas for closing the gap in science and in our classrooms. And all of these have been shown to be successful mitigation efforts. And so briefly presenting them: increased student engagement. So the term active learning, creating an active learning environment helps students stay engaged and learn deeper. That will decrease that gap. Create an inclusive learning environment. Incorporating programs like a Like Me peer model support in the classroom is very effective, plus faculty including culturally responsive teaching methods in their classes. The third one that we're mentioning is implement new assessment methods. So if we decrease the number or the weight of high stakes written exams and replace those with assessments which have been shown to be more equitable for all demographic groups, then that is helpful. And lastly, close the digital divide, making sure that all students have equal access to technology, which is certainly a huge factor when the pandemic hit. Students without laptops or fast internet were left scrambling, and the college, one of the first beautiful stories of just getting laptops to students who needed them so that that digital divide would not grow when the pandemic hit. So this is how STEM education researchers are examining the achievement gap. I loved in the talk, in the keynote, Dr. Dennis mentioned the term opportunity and access gap. So we're looking at research in different classroom learning environments to see how these environments affect and address this gap. So thank you very much for listening to our introduction. And what we'd like to do next is have a deeper discussion on impressions from this afternoon's sessions, with an exploration of ideas and thoughts related to critical race theory, especially as those relate to science and STEM as a whole.